Yes, I think we're recording. Excellent.
Okay.
Yes, we are. Hi.
Hi.
Um, for the folks watching the video, I'm Joe Patton. This is Annette Norris. I'm a personal injury lawyer, and Annette is a social worker specializing in mental health, right?
Right.
And we did an interview, what was it, last March or something? Yeah.
Oh, May.
Yeah. It was back right in the middle of the COVID thing, the lockdown,
Right.
and all of that, and that was all about anxiety, because we were seeing, at least I was seeing in my clients, a lot of anxiety and problems, and I called you up to interview you again because I have been noticing with my clients and my staff and my employees what I'm going to call depression, at least a depressed mood, and we'll talk a little bit about what is depression, what's not depression, and try to get some expert input to assist, because this has been quite a year. I mean, we've had the pandemic, we've had people losing their jobs, we've had politics. That's depressing, and then the economy's tanking, and slowly over time, people begin to maybe lose a little hope, and they begin to find it more difficult to get out of bed in the morning, and just a general, I don't know what you call it, but it's just everywhere. And so I thought, well, maybe it's time to talk about that a little bit. And I'll be sharing this with my clients, and hopefully we can, get a handle on ways to cope and deal with that. And so let's start out with, there's lots of words dealing with this sort of thing: depression, discouragement, grief, sadness. From the point of view of when I feel depressed, all those things feel the same to me. Are there actual differences between those things, particularly in terms of, how we need to respond to them?
Okay. Think of all of those feelings kind of on a spectrum. And some would be like a 10, and some would be 4, 5, or 6. So when we're dealing with things that are on the 8, 9, and 10 level, that's when we're talking probably about some kind of clinical depression. And the key difference is how long the symptoms have been there. And if you feel them every day for more days than not over a 2-week period, then chances are we've crossed into the realm of clinical depression. Now, those symptoms are things like persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness, loss of interest in activities you normally used to enjoy, difficulty sleeping or sleeping too much, weight gain or weight loss, extreme fatigue, anxiety, restlessness, frustration, or irritability. Now, especially in males, their depression usually shows up more as irritability, anger, crankiness, all those kind of things.
Really? Why is that?
I don't know the difference, other than the fact that your brains are a little different than ours are, but they're not men are usually not the ones that can't get out of bed in the morning, but they are just curmudgeons to live around when they're depressed.
Okay. So all of those things we experience are similar, but you're saying the intensity and the duration is what kind of separates it out between just a mood and a clinical depression.
Diagnosis. Yeah.
And do you need to get professional treatment in all clinical depression, or are there certain things that we need to look at?
It would be to your benefit to get treatment, because when clinical depression goes undiagnosed and untreated, it begins to make severe changes in the brain. it shuts down the hippocampus, and the blood flow in those areas, this is what happens with elderly people. The blood flow begins to just dry up, and then it's harder to come back from. But if we're able to go in there with a medication, then that stays active and we don't lose function.
So
Because if you stay in a clinical depression for a long time, you are going to lose the ability to function effectively.
so what you're saying is that it's not just an emotional thing, that if someone suffers from clinical depression over a long period of time, it begins to change the metabolism and starts setting in and could have some pretty serious long-term effects.
Yes.
And
yes, major health issues, just on down the line, because we just close in and are more muted, and yes, it can just affect you physically in all kinds of ways.
Okay, let's is there some things that a person can do before they get to clinical depression? Some techniques, some tools, some things that might help alleviate their situation before they have to get some treatment?
Probably the first thing that I would say, if we're talking, if we're talking grief is kind of its own animal of depression.
Okay.
And that is a loss and a blow to the system that is maybe a different type of thing than the average person that might have a down day every now and then. So that's worth talking about, but I'm going to set that aside over here. And we're just going to talk about the idea of sadness as an emotion, and that feeling of unhappiness. The first thing that I would probably have somebody do is examine their thinking, because chances are there are beliefs behind what's causing the feeling.
Okay, talk about that a little bit. What kind of beliefs are you talking about?
I'm helpless. I'm unlovable. I'm not important. I'm overwhelmed. Those kind of things. If you stay with those feelings, nobody likes me. People are out to get me. Those kind of feelings will lead to an increase of sad and unhappy feelings. But we have to challenge those. Okay, are you really helpless? No, you can do what you can do. You can control what you can control. You can get your needs met in healthy ways. You can take responsibility for what you can take responsibility for, but not for everything. You can get through this. It's a matter of challenging negative beliefs with truth. I'm alone. Well, I know you feel alone, but is that really even possible when God is everywhere?
You know what is fascinating, Annette? You just described some of the phone conversations I had with my mom when I was in college and I was depressed. And I would call her up. And my dad would jump on the phone and he says, "Oh, just buck up." You know? So.
That's not who you want to pick for the counselor.
But what you're saying is that if it's something short of clinical depression, then we could interrupt that process by examining the actual thoughts that's going through our mind that may be producing the sadness, and or maybe even talking to friends or family,
right?
Other folks who would be positive and willing to listen and draw some of those,
right,
and maybe challenge some of those negative assumptions that we've adopted. So
right.
Okay.
That and you want to choose that person carefully, because some people feel like they have to be cheerleaders or clowns, and they have to try and talk you out of what you're feeling. When sometimes what you need is someone that just hears you and will let you be sad, but another thing that happens with this is your vision kind of becomes more tunneled. So you see fewer options. And when somebody says, well, I can see that, but have you thought about this? It's like, oh, no, I hadn't thought about that, because our vision has become too narrow.
Sure, sure. That's helpful. If someone wanted to read a little bit about this and get some background, where would you point them?
I can't think of her name, but the name of the book is Get Out of Your Head.
Okay.
And Jenny Allen, I think, is the name of it. That's a useful book in confronting those beliefs.
Very good. All right. Okay. Well, this has been very helpful.
Okay.
And obviously, if someone gets involved with clinical depression, they could call you or some other professional. And,
or their medical doctor, or
yeah. And you have a web page. They can Google your name and find your web page, right?
Right. Christ First Counseling Center, CFCC. Yes, and you can find us.
Excellent. One of the things I have found, and let me just close with this question to you. I do a lot of personal injury work where I represent people that have been in car accidents or other kinds of accidents, and they have physical injuries, but they're suffering from real physical pain over a period of time. Something like that can lead to some pretty severe depression as well.
Yes, chronic pain and when our normal gets interrupted, and especially physical things, that is the hardest to overcome, because it's hard to find a silver lining when you just darn hurt.
Right. That's not you can't get rid of that by happy talk or getting rid of thoughts, because it's always there, just in and out.
You can make it better by challenging your thoughts and doing what you know to do, what's available to do to help you. You can make it better.
Okay. All right, great. Well, Annette, you're wonderful as always. I appreciate your expertise. And
hey.
If someone has a question about mental health issues, get a hold of Annette. If you have a legal issue, you can shoot me an email at joe@joepatton.com. And let's hope that the entire situation in the nation gets better, so we don't have to suffer all this.
That's right.
That's called, is that called situational depression?
Yep, that's what that would be.
There we go. Yeah, that's horrible.
Every night on the news, that's what that is.
Maybe the best thing we can do is just not watch the news.
That's my solution.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.